come in there, because the media portrayal is obviously of interest to us, particularly in the fact that whatever the pluses and the negatives of the BDO review, as they pointed out, they actually made 9 points, I think, where they were very praiseworthy of the process and Mr. Harper. Yet none of that ever found its way into the media. How do you see that as feeding into what you're saying? Is that all part of this bigger picture?
And also the recommendations, which were the key to their report, didn't seem to get, well, they didn't get the coverage that the other aspects did.
No, exactly. I mean, often when these kind of consultants are employed, they know perfectly well what their job is. They're there to produce something that can be spun. And it's then up to the media, of course, to be the other part of the apparatus and to make sure that what the experts produce is then spun appropriately to the public. And in fact, I was up at Channel Television a couple of weeks ago in their foyer, and they have a number of these kind of, perspex plastic, awards and things that they've won for different things on display in their reception area. And one of them is the award that Channel Television won for what was supposedly an investigative examination of the alleged financial mismanagement of the Obligarian investigation. This thing caught my eye as I was stood there waiting at the reception desk, and I had to actually struggle not to just burst out laughing in public looking at this. I mean, this is simply it's an act of corruption. This is media corruption. Let's not beat about the bush. All Channel Television did was simply cut and paste bits and pieces from the BDO report, and largely lots of spin doctor press releases prepared by the establishment to make sure that it was presented in a particular way, in a condemnatory way, in a further effort to trash and discredit the historic abuse investigation. And one of the most fascinating things about that episode, of course, is that Channel Television were quoting verbatim parts of, I think it was the BDO report before it even been published, and certain parts of other evidence in it. Now, the great probability, of course, is that that evidence was, well, it's already, I think, established that Mick Gradwell was leaking evidence to the media, certainly to the national media. So, one would have to assume the probability is that those unlawful leaks, advanced leaks to Channel Television were occurring via Mick Gradwell. Now, there's obviously a very profoundly important matter that arises here. And your panel has already discussed this point on several other occasions with Mr. Harper and Mr. Powell and others. Now, you have Mick Gradwell leaking internal confidential police information to a national journalist. A national journalist who's internationally recognised as being an apologist, as it were, or somebody who's a known skeptic, the kind of go-to person if you want to try and heap discredit and criticism upon child abuse investigations. Now, at the time that was occurring, and it's really quite remarkable, you have to bear in mind that at the time that was occurring, Mick Gradwell was the senior police officer in charge of the child abuse investigation. Now, what on earth, why would a senior officer actually with the responsibility for leading an historic child abuse investigation be doing, leaking quite plainly carefully selected, carefully calculated information, calculated to damage and discredit the investigation? Why would he be leaking such material to a national journalist with a reputation for undermining child abuse investigations? Now, that, I think, is one of the most stark facts that's emerged in recent months. And it's quite remarkable indeed. It ties in very much to your discussion because at the end of the day we're talking about ordinary people and what gets done to them and the things they suffer and what society has in place to protect ordinary people. And part of that protection is, of course, the fourth estate, the media. In democracies, we often rely upon the media to expose wrongdoing and put what's right. Yet this quite a staggering fact about the conduct of Gradwell has been exposed in recent months. And I don't think it's been meaningfully reported in any of Jersey's mainstream media at all. Now, there's a major debate taking place in the United Kingdom at the moment, which there's broad consensus between all the main political parties that the whole conduct of the media, the print media in particular, and its relationship to power, lobbying, commercial interests, politicians, spin doctors, it's finally, it took a particularly disgusting episode to bring it out, but it probably should have been addressed years ago, but finally the whole real toxic and foul nature of that whole power scene, that whole power structure is finally beginning to be faced up to. And that's in a situation where you at least have a degree of diversity and a degree of checks and balances. You've got competing political parties, for example. You know, Rupert Murdoch doesn't own all of the national newspapers. There are alternatives to him. You know, there's the Telegraph, there's the Guardian, and so on. You know, there's the BBC. So, in the UK, there is a degree of media diversity, but even there, they see that clearly that something's gone catastrophically wrong, and the whole question of media power and its relationship with those in power has to be addressed. Now, in Jersey, the situation is vastly worse than that. There was only one newspaper. That newspaper is effectively in receipt of tens of thousands, I'm not sure, because I think the last figure I saw was maybe 300,000 or something. It's in receipt of a lot of money each year out of taxpayers and ratepayers' pockets. Obviously, the newspaper's got to keep the politicians sweet to guarantee that it carries on getting that income, which is why you'll see basically the Jersey Evening Post always depicts and presents the establishment line in things, which is why it produced the BDO, depicted the BDO report as it did, and why it always attacks and trashes anyone, any individual, me or Graham Powell, or Lenny Harp, or anyone else for that matter, anyone who's not on the centre right or the extreme right, anyone that's on the centre ground or on the centre left gets marginalised, victimised by the Jersey Evening Post, and it's a fundamental problem. You can look back upon the saga of the last couple of years, or the last 4 years, but the last couple of years in particular, and the only detailed, evidence-based, factual reporting there has been of the things you're discussing today and all the related matters has been by citizens media journalists on the blogs. People like me and other people have written and published, done citizens journalist work, and you couldn't go to the Jersey Evening Post website, even if you had access to the full website, and find the evidence documents and the facts about all of these matters, but you can on the blogs.